open to our youth to ask any questions that they want. What I'm going to do to begin with is I am going to let everybody introduce themselves quickly so that you can know who we have on this panel. And I think so I don't look ridiculous, I'm going to go ahead and pull this off. Anyway, Pastor Dennis Webb, Bear Creek Community Church here in Irving, Texas, and also an Irving City Council member. And I'm going to start here to my right. And if you would just pick up the microphone, tell us your name and who you are.
My name is Cisco, and that's all.
Okay.
My name is Jeff Spivey, and I'm with the Irving Police Department.
My name is Leia Cummings.
Officer Basley with the Irving Police Department.
Hello, my name is Ashley Henderson.
My name is Blair Ward, retired ATF and former Dallas PD.
Hello, my name is Desmond Henderson, student at Mississippi State University and a member of Bear Creek Church.
Hello, my name is Takia Johnson. I'm a deputy sheriff with the Dallas County Sheriff Department.
My name is Carly Bird. I'm a member of Bear Creek Community Church.
I am Ed Wright. I'm the constable in Precinct 4 out here in Irving.
My name is Travis Allen. I'm with the Irving Police Department.
Hello, my name is Lee Cummings, and I am
You got to talk into the mic.
Irving Nimitz High School.
Okay. Y'all remember, you got to talk into the mic, else it won't be heard. And also, please make sure when you speak, pull your face mask down so everybody can hear you. Okay, well, now you got an idea of who our panel is this evening, and so we want to just dive right in. What we're going to do, though, is we're going to spend about the next hour just having a conversation amongst the panel, and then at 8 o'clock, if you have questions, we want you to send them in via our comment section, and then we'll get those questions to the panel, and we'll have a discussion from there. So, does any of our youth want to lead us off tonight? Any youth want to lead off with a leading question tonight to get us started? Okay, so Lee.
My first question is, why don't officers get more involved with the neighborhood, have basketball games or with the kids so they could get to know them more?
Okay, anybody want to address that question? His question was, why don't officers get more involved with the community? Okay.
Well, I'm not sure how long you have lived in the city of Irving, but we have multiple programs where we reach out to the community. For one, we have the Irving Police Athletic League, which is on Rock Island, which is in South Irving. We offer boxing, tennis, wrestling, physical fitness class. All those things are free of charge. All you have to do is sign a waiver form with your parent and show up for the classes. But since the pandemic has a lot of things closed, our gym is currently closed. But in addition to that, we have the basketball program, which is held every summer in the gym at Sam Houston Middle School. And it starts from the first week of July, and it goes to the first week of August. And that's free of charge also. In addition to that, we also have Kicks, which is a soccer program that's held at the Irving Stadium down South Irving next to Bowie Middle School. So we have multiple programs where we reach out to the community, and we're constantly trying to develop more. And if you have anything that you would like us to develop, that would give us also a great idea on what direction to go to reach out to youth like yourself.
Thank you. Anybody else like to chime in on that question? Matter of fact, I think, Cisco, you've been a part of some of their programs, haven't you? You want to kind of tell us what program that you have participated in? You was telling me that the other day.
I've been participating every summer for 5 to 6 years. It's called Summer Hoops every year at Sam Houston. They have a basketball program, and basically you just do drills, they feed you, play scrimmages, dodgeball, kickball, and it's basically all. And
all right.
Everything else.
All right, thank you. Thank you. Yes, yeah, and I did learn from a presentation that there's a lot of things that the Urban Police Department does for the community. I shared with them during one of our council meetings how one of the programs they had was a program where they had some kids going through a program who had made some kind of bad decisions, and part of their program was to do community service. And they actually came over to our church community garden, and they actually did some community service in our garden, but they also helped to pack some food boxes for some of the people that we've been giving out. So, yeah, so if you're listening to this, this is your first time hearing this, yeah, you can go to the police department website also, Chief, I think, and that information will be there too. All right. Good question. Thank you, Lee. All right. Yes, sir. Go ahead.
Hey, Lee, did you mean, say, like a patrol officer stopping by when you're playing basketball or playing and engaging in you, as opposed to pre-organized programs that are already available?
Yeah, like it's like the little stuff that like,
Put that to your
cause like
mouth.
I'm a young man and like I like to play basketball and then I see officers going by like if one, it's like all it takes is one to like start a trend. So like if one could stop and like just talk to us, cause some of us just need to be talked to, and like that'll, well, I say calm a lot of the police with young black teen situations down.
Okay.
Let me offer a couple perspectives on that one, because it's not just one answer. Because I honestly, I don't know why. It's not one thing. I do know there's certain things in play. For instance, personality. You know, not everyone has the same personality. Is going to step out and go out of their way to engage, just for the purpose of engaging. And you probably know several people in your circles of friends that are the same way. Like you got to go in there and pull them out to get them to engage. That's one thing. Another thing is, to be honest with you, we're ain't that good at basketball players wearing all this stuff. And who wants to get embarrassed on a court, you know, falling over and whatnot? So I'll tell you a story real quick. Whenever I first went to day shift here in Irving, I think it was February, we had a snow, right? There were some kids riding shovels down a hill over on Rochelle Boulevard. So me and a buddy of mine, there wasn't any calls going on because no one was out because the roads were icy. So we got out, and I was riding the shovel down the hill. Well, part of that is it's just my personality. You know, I'm not afraid to make a fool of myself. But that's not your typical officer, usually by nature. Does that make sense to you? Yeah. So I mean, that is an aspect that plays into it. But I would like to see it more. But of course, I mean, it's easy for me. It's not easy for everybody. Just like for you, it might not be easy to engage in certain things that it's not your nature.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think those are really good points. And one of the other things that are lost is those men and women you see in those patrol cars that are driving by, so much of their time is spent going from 911 call to 911 call. And so they don't have a lot of free time just to mark out and engage our community like we would like for them to. Now, there are periods of time that it's slower. There aren't as many calls for service. And what we would do is encourage them to do those kinds of things. And I think to Officer Allen's point, part of it's their personality. Do they have that outgoing personality or not? But a lot of it is also just driven by the workload and getting out of the car and engaging and playing basketball. They're still tied to that radio, and they have to be ready to respond at any moment to a call for help. And so, you know, having that time just to disconnect isn't always as easy to come by as we would like for it to be.
And I think he just, brings up a point that, as we go back and start looking at, ways to improve, that's one aspect of it, just kind of more, however we figure out how to do it, more just kind of some just engagement. I think it's good. All right, who got the next question? Desmond, Desmond, and then Desmond, then Ashley.
All right, and my question is kind of going to the resources that's available to us as youth and just citizens in general on our rights and how a typical experience with law enforcement should go. What resources are there that we can go? Because I think sometimes the ignorance of us not knowing how a situation can go could evoke the fear that can kind of, make situations and stuff happen. So what resources are there available for us as citizens?
Okay. What resources are available so that there'll be more information of how to respond or how to engage law enforcement officials? All right.
So one of the programs that we offer here in Irving is very similar to what we're experiencing here tonight. It's called Law Enforcement in You. And it's a group of officers that we come together and we talk about what our expectations are whenever we have an encounter with a resident or a citizen, whether it's on a traffic stop, which is how most encounters occur, or whether it's in a pedestrian stop. And what we do is we walk the people in attendance through what it looks like to be stopped and what a police officer would like to see. Because believe it or not, stopping a car is one of the scariest things that we do, because we have no idea who's sitting in that car when we go walking up on it. We don't know if it's just somebody who was speeding or has an expired inspection sticker, or whether it's somebody that's just robbed and killed somebody. And we experience that whole realm of emotions as you're walking up to the car, especially at night, because you can't see very well. And so what we encourage people to do is, if you're stopped on traffic, if you're the driver or a passenger, that you keep your hands on the steering wheel until the officer gives you some kind of direction. That if it's not time, that you turn the light on inside the car just to help that officer be able to see better. So it just brings that anxiety down a little bit, that fear down a little bit. And then what we also encourage you to do, if you feel like that the stop was illegal or improper, or you feel like that you were mistreated during that stop, is at the end of every stop, the officer is going to give you a card. And on that card is a way to file a compliment or a complaint. On our website, there's a link to file a complaint against a police officer. And so what we'd encourage you to do is always, if you feel like there was mistreatment involved, to let us know. I have a special section within the police department that all they do is investigate complaints against other police officers. That's their entire job. You also have the opportunity to ask for a supervisor to come to the scene during the stop. If you feel like that things have gotten out of hand, or that you want some resolution right then, you always have that right to say, I would really like to talk to a supervisor. Can you have a supervisor come to the scene? And so those are some of the things that we do, that we talk about in that program. I think on our website, or on the, not the website, the Department of Public Safety's, in the driver handbook, it talks about some of those same things from a driver's perspective and what you can do. And then, some of the other programs that we offer are the Citizens Police Academy. And we encourage all of our residents to go through our Citizens Police Academy, because in a 12-week period of time, you're going to learn all there is to know about policing. And that will be some of the things that we talk about from our perspective, what to expect. And then, once we get through this pandemic, we have a civilian rider program where you can come out, you sign a waiver, and you get to ride around with a police officer during his or her shift, and you get to ask those kinds of questions. You get to see that officer interact with the public, and that's a great way to learn as well.
Thank you. Chief White, before you chime in, Chief, explain to them the police academy. How, if somebody want to sign up for the police academy, what would they need to do?
So you go to our website. It's listed under one of our community programs, and you fill out the application, you submit it. We offer 2 programs in English a year and 2 programs in Spanish each year. And so you just sign up for one of those programs, fill out the paperwork, and as long as you don't have a criminal history, because you get exposed to some sensitive material, some things that are protected by federal law from a CJIS, or a Criminal Justice Information System perspective. And you sign up and you're assigned a date to start, and for 12 weeks, every Monday night or every Tuesday night for about 2.5 hours, you go through the program.
Thank you, and I would recommend that every citizen, take the opportunity to go through that program. Yes, sir.
Just to build on what the Chief just explained to you, you mentioned that you were in college, correct? We also have a program that has been implemented in all of the middle schools and high schools, where we take that same program that the Chief mentioned, but we label it as, and call it the talk. And we go through situations where if you're stopped while you're not driving, or when you get old enough to drive, for high schoolers, and we explain to them different things that they should do to minimize any type of confrontation during the contact with police officers. So that is also a program that we do in all of the schools from middle school up to high school.
Thank you. Okay. All right, let's move on to the next question. Ashley.
My question is, what are all of my rights do I have when I get pulled over?
Okay. What are all of her rights that she has when she gets pulled over? And that's a very a good question because I actually had a conversation with a gentleman the other day who he was pretty upset about a video that he saw, and he saw everything that the police did wrong. And he kept saying that, the guy didn't have a right. His rights was he didn't have to answer any questions if he didn't want to. So is that true? Do you do if someone, and I'm not stealing your question because we're going to further elaborate and have your question asked, but I think that question need to be asked. Does a citizen can say, I'm not asking any of your questions?
Actually, good question. So I'm in the motor section, which means I drive a motorcycle and pull people over 5 days a week, 8 hours a day. So I need to know what my citizens' rights that I'm pulling over are. You don't have to answer any questions. You do have to identify yourself. That's part of the requirement if it's a lawful traffic stop. Say, for instance, a lawful traffic stop is speeding or not using your turn signal within 100 feet of an intersection. The traffic code is huge, so there's plenty of violations that you could commit that would get a lawful traffic stop. So once you are pulled over, someone like me walks up to your window, you do have to identify yourself. You don't have to talk. It'd be more pleasant if you did, but you don't have to. You do, how do I put this? You are detained. You're not under arrest, but you are detained. And when you're detained, then an officer can control your movement. So if you jump in the back seat and start digging through a backpack or something like that, the officer's probably going to get in there and stop you. And here's an instance that happened to me about a month ago. A young lady, I pulled her over for speeding, and she was really upset. And I was remaining calm, and she was giving me the information, but she was really mad. And then she decided, she pushed the door open and tried to push her way past me. Well, it's a lawful traffic stop. She is lawfully detained. She can't walk away, and I can control her movements if I need to. And I stopped her, and I was as gentle as possible, and I told her, I said, hey, you're going to stop, or I'm going to have to put you in handcuffs. And she kept resisting, and I ended up putting her in handcuffs. She didn't actually go to jail. She was just detained because I couldn't figure out why she was so upset. I ended up writing her a citation for speeding and letting her go, but she definitely didn't have to end up in handcuffs based upon something like that. Are there any rights that you have heard are there any that you want to ask me? Hey, do I have the right to do this or not do this?
Whenever they ask you, are you allowed to ask, like, why am I, like, under arrest, or, like, why am I getting arrested and, like, staying where you're at? Like, do you have to go where they tell you to go, or can you just stay there and ask the question? And are they allowed to answer, like, why are you?
Is this on a traffic stop, or is this walking, or what?
Just anywhere.
Anywhere. Let me understand the question. Are you asking, are you allowed, if an officer tells you to go over here, like, hey, I need you to come stand over here, are you allowed to ask why?
Yes.
Most certainly, yeah. There are some situations you can imagine based upon the urgency of why an officer needs you to move. Maybe you're in danger, and I just need, Ashley, I need you to go over here now. And it may be involving you or someone next to you, or maybe a group of friends you're with, but they need you to move. But most certainly, if you're being detained, if you're being put in handcuffs, I mean, I would ask why am I being arrested? Why am I being detained? You can certainly ask that. If they don't give you an answer right away, there's probably a reason for that. And let me give you an example. Say I go to arrest someone and put handcuffs on them, but I don't want them to know until I have them in handcuffs why I'm arresting them. Maybe I found something in their car that they had hidden, like a firearm or something. And, you know, I say, hey, you got a couple warrants, not a big deal. And I go to put them in handcuffs. And they say, well, why am I being arrested? Oh, you know, I'll tell you in just a second. If I say I found your gun before I get the handcuffs on, well, he may think, oh, no. And then the fight's on, or he takes off running. But soon, if you're being detained or told to go somewhere, most certainly an officer should tell you why. I mean, everyone would expect that type of treatment.
Yeah. Takia, I see you shaking your head like that. Takia works for the sheriff's department, and so would you concur with what you just heard, Takia?
Yes, I would. I do understand that there are times when officers will stop you, and they're just like, hey, let me see your license and registration. And you're like, well, why did you stop me? And at that point, it's kind of difficult because as an officer, you understand that, hey, you know, this is my stop. I'm lawfully stopping you. I really need you to cooperate with me so we can get this done. So they some officers get taken aback and they want to make sure that, you know, they're doing it in a certain order. Maybe that's just how they work. But it's definitely, I find it more useful if they ask that before I tell them to go ahead and tell them. But it can cause an argument if they feel that that's not what they did. So depending on that officer, I think it works both ways. Allow them to be able to say, hey, can I see your license? Because you have to give that to them. If you're driving on the road, you've got to have it. And then they can also say, okay, well, maybe they just want to know why, and say, hey, this is why I stopped you. So I think it's situational.
All right. Constable.
Hey, this is a question for Ashley. Ashley, you've seen some of the videos where some of the officers have to get into a little scuffle with some of the people they pulled over, correct?
Yes.
So what do you think about the videos you've seen where the officer just walked up to the car and said, hey, I'm Officer so-and-so, I need to see your license and insurance, and you've seen those people like barely let the window down and don't want to talk to them or just say, hey, I don't have to do this and that. How does that make you feel when you see those people treating officers that way?
I feel that it puts the officer in a situation as to being suspicious, and I feel like they're mostly in fear, like for the people that's in the car, by like what's going around and stuff like that, and the stuff that they heard. I feel like they're probably in fear, but that fear might make the officer more suspicious, like, you know.
You say you believe that the people who are getting pulled over, they're a little afraid because of things they've seen before in the past. You said you think they may be a little nervous, thinking the officer's going to do something. But I guess my next question to you would be, how do you think that traffic stop would have gone if that once the officer went up there, they just would have said, hey, let me see a license and insurance, and that person would have handed it to him?
It would have been easier, and it probably would have went by faster and more productive.
Okay. So you do understand that, and that, so if you're out with maybe some of your friends and you guys are in groups and talking, y'all see some situation like that, I think it would be a good idea if you're in that situation, just to tell them, hey, I think it's better if we just give those officers what they're asking for instead of try to be argumentative with them, because it'll go a lot easier if I'm cooperative.
Right. Thank you.
Thank you. I think, Desmond, did you have a follow-up, or you?
Yes, it was kind of a follow-up question, just asking about like the specific rights. Is the officer allowed to ask you to get out of the car and search your car without a search warrant during a traffic stop?
It all depends. There can be certain situations where an officer may not ask you to search your vehicle. For instance, if we walk up to your driver's side window or your passenger window and we smell marijuana or we see it in plain view, at that point we don't have to say, excuse me, Desmond, do you mind if I search your vehicle? You know, if we walk up and we see a firearm in plain view, we see anything, smell anything that gives us probable cause to search your car, we do not have to ask. I can tell you out of courtesy, Desmond, step out of the car. I said, how long have you been smoking marijuana in the car? I smell it coming out. You know, I'm going to search your car. But I don't have to ask for permission to do that. But it all depends on different situations. And also, just to build a little bit on the question that Ashley had earlier, just going through the academy here, there's a method that's called the 7-step violator approach. So whenever an officer stops you, Ashley, whether it's you're walking or whether you're driving, and I've made many stops throughout my career, every time I go up, I introduce myself, and I'll explain to you exactly how I explain to the driver or the person that I stop why I'm stopping them and what I need from them. So when I walk up, I say, my name is Officer Basley with the Urban Police Department. I stop you for speeding. I need to see your driver's license and insurance, please. So at that point, I get everything out in the beginning so you know why I'm stopping you and what I need from you so that there's no confusion. Now, I can understand in certain situations where I may not say that to you because I may have been doing surveillance on you for different reasons. And when I stop you, I have other reasons for stopping you, and I may act quicker other than just me doing a traffic stop and telling you why I stopped you, what my name, and all those things. So it just all depends because it's a constant working situation. But majority of the times, whenever you get stopped, they should tell you their name, the agency they work for, what they're stopping you for, the documents that they need.
Let me throw this question there. This actually, somebody asked this question, and it kind of goes along with the stop. And the question was, and I know we were supposed to have done this last, but I think it's kind of right now, but it would be a good time to ask it, is does the officer have to tell you why they need your ID? That's the question that was asked. Does the officer have to tell you why they need your ID? What law or violation I broke showing my ID? That's the question.
Whether certain stops or detainments that you are required to provide your name and date of birth or ID. Traffic stop is one of them. Say you're out in front of 7-Eleven at 2 a.m. hanging out with some people, and officer comes up and asks for your ID. You don't have to give it to him if you haven't. If you're not lawfully detained, and yeah, you don't have to identify yourself. Passengers of vehicles don't have to identify themselves as long as they haven't been involved in any type of a crime or any part of the traffic stop or anything else. And I'll get into this in a minute. Actually, there's other reasons besides traffic violations that you can get you pulled over by an officer. But yeah, the passenger doesn't have to. I mean, an officer, depending on the situation, may ask. There's many times where I walk up to a car on a basic traffic stop, and I start, the hair on the back of my neck starts standing up, and I start realizing there's other things going on besides the traffic violation. Drugs, narcotics, gangs, and I'm just reading the nonverbal cues by the driver as well as the passenger. And then I'll just start asking them, things beyond the traffic stop, beyond the information. Now, real quick, I'll get into the other situation besides the traffic violation that can get your car pulled over. And this can, people can oftentimes become offended by this. All an officer needs it for a traffic stop is not probable cause. All they need is reasonable suspicion. Let me give you an example. There's a 7-Eleven down the street here. It's somewhere down the street, there's a 7-Eleven. Say a call goes out, there's a robbery. Suspect, white male in a blue Toyota Corolla, left westbound on Finley. I think westbound on Finley is that direction. So an officer is starting to respond to it. Within 30 seconds, he's heading towards the gas station, sees a white male driving a blue Toyota Corolla coming from the direction of the robbery. Well, that's reasonable suspicion to pull the vehicle over. He hasn't committed a traffic violation usually. He just, a reasonable person would say that a white male driving a blue Toyota Corolla coming from the direction of a fresh armed robbery could most definitely be the suspect. And like I said, some people will get offended by that, and you try to explain the best you can as an officer. Something happened. It's not necessarily you, but we're just trying to rule you out. And some people can get quite offended over that. Like, you think I look like a criminal? Like, no, I think you look like a white male driving a blue Toyota Corolla coming from the direction of the 7-Eleven. And hopefully an officer will have the courtesy to explain it to you the best they can. And then some people, it doesn't matter what you say anyway, they're just going to be upset. So they started off that way.
Okay. All right. Lee has a question.
I know with all this going on, like people dying around the world, like mostly black people. I wonder how the officers feel towards this, because I realize that officers, like, they're people too, and they have feelings, and people like just like don't care about y'all. Like, I wonder how do y'all feel?
Can you have him say the question again?
He's asking, how do you guys feel as law enforcement officers toward the way people are maybe viewing police officers or the negativity toward police officers? Yeah, he's asking personally, how do y'all feel as law enforcement? How does it make y'all feel with all the negative that's going on?
Lee, I will speak for myself. I've been in policing for over 30 years, and anytime one of these events happen, and it's not just what happened to George Floyd, you can go back all the way as far back as you want to go and find where there have been instances where police have done things that they shouldn't have done, and somebody got hurt or killed. And no matter where that happened, it affected police everywhere. Because when you wear the uniform, you're put into a category with everyone else who wears the uniform. And so what that officer did in Minneapolis to George Floyd is thousands of miles from here. But you saw the reverberation that it had across the nation and across the world. And I know that from my own perspective and from talking to other police officers, that made us angry, because we work so hard day in and day out to try to build trust relationships, to try to get people to understand our perspective, to try to get people to like us and to cooperate with us, because without that, we can't do our jobs. We carry badges and guns, but there's only a limited number of us. And there's way more citizens than there are police officers. And you have the power to protest, you have the power to riot, you have the power, which is way more powerful, you have the power to vote. And through your votes, you get to change the laws, you get to change who represents you, and then they have the power to change the police culture, either through changing the chief of police or having the federal government come in a consent decree. So it makes us really angry when something like that happens, because that wasn't here, yet we're feeling the effects of it. And it hurts us, because that's not how we would treat somebody. And yet all of a sudden we're labeled, or I'm labeled as that person. And I've never treated somebody like that. I would never treat somebody like that. But all of a sudden I'm being castigated in that same framework. And it's hurtful, it's stressful, and it's really difficult for the men and women who are out there encountering our residents and trying to do the job that they love doing, only to be cursed at and yelled at and hated. And we get the emotion. We understand how hurtful it is for our community members. I think from a police officer perspective, just understand that that wasn't us, and that's not who we are. And so it makes it really hard.
Thank you. I know you're a retired ATF agent, Blair, but you actually was a police officer at one time too. You'd like to chime in on this question? I know you've been out of the line for a while, but what would be your response to that?
Yeah, Lee, I've never seen anybody treated like that before, and I was on our national response team and responded to major fires and bombings and explosions like the Oklahoma City bombing and those type of incidents, and a lot of the arson fires that happened in Minneapolis. That's where the ATF National Response Team is. They're working over 100 fires there just in Minneapolis alone. I've never encountered anybody that would treat anybody like that with any police department, and I've worked around hundreds of police officers all over the country. So painting, as the chief said, painting all officers with that broad brush is really not fair to them. And it really makes things harder as far as you're being able to interact with police because you've got already a preconceived idea about them. And so I would just recommend that you take that as a isolated incident and that 99.9% of them would never dream of doing anything like that.
Thank you. Desmond?
Kind of want to talk a little bit more about the preconceived notion, but kind of in terms of the de-escalation training. I want to know how that works in terms of police officers, especially here in Irving, and also how that works in terms of people who have mental illnesses. How does de-escalation training work with people who have mental illnesses? Is it race-based? Like, how does that whole process work?
So when you're training to be a police officer, you go through the police academy, and in the police academy, there's a specific course of instruction that they put you through to help you learn how to talk to people. They give you different phrases to use to calm the situation down, how to control the tone of your voice, how to control the inflection of your voice. You know, all of the different tools that you can use in order to help de-escalate the situation, to keep it from continuing to get to a point where some physical confrontation is going to occur. You ask about the mental health aspect of it. All of our police officers get 40 hours of training on dealing with mental health consumers. And so they learn, again, those things that we might say or do that could trigger someone to respond in a physical way or cause them to shut down or cause them not to listen to us. We learned techniques to use in order to communicate. And then we have even more specialized training for our mental health unit that we try to use on those types of calls because here in Irving, we have a mental health response team that it's 3 highly trained police officers. They've even had more training than our regular police officers in answering mental health calls. But they also have a clinical psychologist that rides along with them to provide her expertise in how to deal with those calls. I think you ask about race. There's no particular way we talk to someone of a different race or different races. We're all human beings. We all, I think, respond to the same types of emotion. We respond to the same types of direction. And it's truly about being kind, talking quietly, not ordering someone to do something, just trying to communicate as effectively as possible in order to resolve that situation as peacefully as possible.
Thank you. Yes, Constable.
Desmond, I was on the our mental illness team for a while, and like the chief was saying, there's not going to be a set way you do it every time, because each person that we come in contact with may have a different illness, or that person may have something different going on that particular day. So there's not a there's not a panacea when you say what's the one, like if there's one set answer to how you handle those certain things. So when we go out there, you always had to make sure that you were aware of what you were doing, but you also had to make sure we were respectful. You said something about the race, just like Chief said. That's never an issue. I don't care if you're black, white, male or female, whoever you are. We were trying to make sure we were careful, protecting ourselves, but make sure we didn't harm that person at the same time. Because normally when you go out there and you're serving a mental illness warrant, or you're dealing with someone who has a mental illness, they're not going to be as receptive. Normally they're not going to be as receptive because they have that issue. So we were always taught to make sure that we were a little bit more patient with those people, because normally they're not going to listen as well. Normally they're not going to be as receptive. So we had to make sure we were always patient, we were always calm, and we tried our best to make sure that we didn't go out there with this attitude like, oh, we're going to be upset because this person's not gonna do what we tell them to. Because we knew when we went out there was gonna be an issue. We knew when went out there normally that they weren't gonna respond the way we wanted them to. From my experience, I would say, they weren't gonna respond the way we wanted them to because they were that issue they were having. But it's, but it made us be a little bit more cautious because normally, I hate to say it, normally it was a struggle. But as officers out there, we had to make sure that we didn't harm those people because we knew normally they wouldn't try to hurt us, but because they had that mental illness going on, that they would react like that sometimes.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. I just can share also myself. For those of you who don't know, I'm a retired firefighter. And I actually ran a lot of calls with police officers, and I ran a lot of calls where we had people with mental illnesses. And unfortunately, a lot of time as the officer, I was the first one in the door before the police officers got there. And I've got a person that's got a mental illness, and now I'm having to try to figure out, as a untrained officer responsible for that scene, how to make this situation better for somebody who's not mentally all stable. I have a son who's got mental illnesses, and the urban police has actually ran on him before, so I'm glad to know that we have that mental health response team, and so thank you, Chief, for that. So let's move on. We still got about 15 minutes in this section. Ms. Carly.
Okay, there's a lot of protests about defunding the police department. How do you guys feel about that?
Carly must read my mind, because I was only going to ask 2 questions in there, and that was one of them. So thank you, Carly. Chief, will you explain that?
Carly, that's a really good question, a very timely question, and I think my answers will kind of surprise you a little bit. So let me go back in time. Years and years and years ago, the government supported a number of different social service programs, whether it was after-school care, whether it was mental health, whether it was job programs. You had all of these things that the government helped take care of so that people had resources that they could rely on, and you didn't have to have the police dealing with these issues. Over time, money was taken away from those programs. They were no longer effective. They quit being used, and the problems still continue to occur. And so what did government do? They gave it to the only branch of government that operates 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and is a 3-digit number away from sending help, and that was the police. And so the police were asked to start handling all of these different issues. And so as we started handling all of these different issues, our other responsibilities didn't go away. These were just added to them. And so what we had to do was ask for more resources. We had to ask for more police officers. We had to ask for more money in order for us to continue to provide the service that we originally provided, plus take care of all of these added responsibilities that other forms of government were giving to us. So our budgets got big. We have a lot of personnel, but it's because we're required to do a lot of different things. So when you start talking about defunding the police, I'm fine with defunding the police, but here are some challenges with that. You still have to find someone to take care of all of those issues that we now take care of. So if you're going to move that money into social services, you have to stand those programs up first, make sure that they're going to be successful, make sure that they're going to be able to address the concerns that they're supposed to address before you take the money away from the police. Because if you go in and first take the money away from us, we're still going to be asked to respond to all of those calls until those programs are stood up and are successful. And we won't be able to do that. So there'll be a gap in services that occur. The other thing that you have to look at when you start talking about defunding the police is 90+% of our budgets are made up on personnel costs. So if you want to start taking money away from the police, that means you're going to have to start laying police officers off, furloughing them, and taking police officers off the street who answer calls for service, which means that when you call 911, instead of it taking 5 minutes for a police officer to show up, it could take an hour for a police officer to show up, because in order to do the defunding that people are talking about, I'm going to have to lay off quite a large number of our police force. You've seen this happen, I think most recently in New York. They defunded their police department by about $1 billion. And they've had to lay off 1,100 police officers. And so that's a number that you're going to feel when you pick up the phone and need the police. You're gonna see a gap in our ability to deliver service. So what I hope happens is that if we continue down this road, we continue to have this conversation, that we put money towards those social service programs first before we start taking money away from the police, because if you do it the other way, you're going to find that gap in services. You're going to have people who are upset because we can't get to calls when we're supposed to, and you're going to have what you'll start seeing is crime go up, and social problems also continue to get worse if you don't truly think about how to do this and do it properly.
Chief,
But that's a great question.
And let me ask you a question too, and of course I should know this answer, but in the Urban Police Department, is the code enforcement and animal services, is that part of your budget, or is that a separate budget altogether?
So code enforcement's a separate budget, but animal services is part of the police budget.
So when you're talking about defunding the Urban Police Department, you're also talking about taking money away from animal services also. Okay, thank you. Chief, Constable, and then Travis.
This was, follow what the chief was saying. When you talk about defunding and you start to remove officers and then you bring those other programs in, pretty much what he was saying, to a point what he was saying, now you got to find those qualified people. You got to find more qualified people to put in positions. Just say if we were to take what we were just talking about, mental illness, we were to take mental illness, serving on mental illness warrants, what we call them, or responding to mental illness calls. Now you got to find people who are qualified to go out there and do that. Because now you have the officers who are trained, but you take that away, now you got to find some people who are qualified to do that. And then, as the chief was saying, the crime rate was going to go up, because we won't be able to respond as quickly as we can to those 911 calls. So people will notice that, okay, they're not coming out as quickly as they used to because there's not many officers, so the crime rate will go up. And now, one thing about, from what you're saying, being a firefighter, I believe it's going to affect the firefighters, because I believe the firefighters are going to start doing more stuff because they tried to defund the police department. We know now that the firefighters are, like you said, they respond, they show up first,
Right.
a lot.
Right.
Now, I believe that puts the firefighters in a situation where they have to respond, and they'll take on some of those duties.
Well, and it doesn't matter, even if you get another agency to respond to those mental issues, you're still going to have police officers showing up because you got to have, you never know what's going to happen, and so you got to have the ability to have at least some kind of, protection or whatever. So, it's kind of a catch-22. But Travis, go ahead.
Hey, this is actually a counter question to Carly, because I'm curious. Defund the police is kind of a thing you see on signs and you see on the bottom of CNN, for the topic of the discussion, but it's not defined, right? So I'm curious what your generation, what does defund the police mean to you, and
Good
why?
question. Good question.
Just to take away money from them. And I feel like a lot of them just want, I feel like a lot of people don't know what the actual term means. They just say it because it's a trend going around. But I feel like what they mostly want is just people like the cops who are like racist to be fired. They don't really want, cops to lose their jobs and like cops not on the streets anymore to make crime go up. They just want the problem to be taken away.
Yeah, in other words, they want reform. I think probably the better word instead of defund is reform. Try to solve some of the issues that we have. You know, and let me just kind of throw this in here too, to a lot of the citizens, especially that's watching, because I've heard, you know, had people tell me, you know, well, they just need to, the police chiefs need to just fire bad officers. Well, Chief Spivey here can tell you that he can't fire anybody. Am I right? Yeah, see, because when you're in a civil service city with like Irving, then the police chief cannot fire. He can recommend to the Civil Service Commission that police officer be, you know, put on indefinite suspension or, you know, terminated. But then that commission then decides whether they're going to agree with them or not. So a lot of times I've heard people say, well, why didn't the police chief just get rid of this bad officer? Well, you know, sometimes the police chief's hands are tied. They may want to, but, and then one thing I've discovered is that even if they recommend to the Civil Service Commission that person be fired in Texas, you can go to what's called third-party arbitration. They can bypass the Civil Service Commission and go to a third-party arbitrator who will then possibly agree and will put the officer back to work. So, you know, and one of the reasons I wanted to do this, because there's a lot of misconceptions out here. People think all this stuff is just real simple. You know, you ought to just do this, but there's just so many other variables that goes into this whole business, you know. But I think having these conversations and helping the public understands more deeply is really gonna help a lot, I hope, in the future. Okay, we still got about like 8 or 9 minutes in this session. The session is scheduled to end at 8:45. We won't go over 8:45, but so does anybody else have any new questions or comments? All right, Leah hasn't been saying anything yet, and then after that we're going to go to Blair and.
So if police brutality was to happen like in Irving, what would be like the protocol for the department?
So if there's a accusation of police brutality, what we do is, I talked about that section of that I have in the police department that investigates other police officers. A lot of people know it as internal affairs. We call it professional standards. They actually investigate those complaints against our police officers. They investigate whether it was excessive force or police brutality or not. And let me back up for a little bit. Every time one of our police officers uses force, they have to write a report. And that report goes to their immediate supervisor, and he reviews that report. We all of our police officers wear body cameras. They all have cameras in their cars. And so the supervisor looks at all of that video evidence, looks at any other evidence that's there. If there was other people there on the scene also videoing, we'll ask to see that. And so that supervisor looks at the report, looks at the videos, knows what our training is, understands what our policies are, and then that supervisor makes a decision on whether that force was, one, justified, and two, was it within our policies and training. And then that supervisor sends it to his supervisor, and then that supervisor looks at it. And it goes through 4 levels of review: a sergeant, a lieutenant, a deputy chief, and an assistant chief all look at that use of force based on that criteria. Then once the assistant chief looks at it, it goes over to our professional standards section, and they look at it one more time before they file it away, just to make sure that everything was within our policy and procedures and our training. If any point during that review process someone has questions, they bring in our training section to have our training section look at it and go, is this what we train, and is this how we train to respond in these circumstances? And so there's a lot of people that weigh in and give their opinion on these uses of force. If at any point there is a violation of our policies or our training, then an investigation is opened up on that employee to see, was that a willful violation, or was that something that happened during the use of force that can be justified, might not be within policy, but wasn't intentional in nature. If it was an intentional in nature, which would be what we would call police brutality, that investigation is then opened up. The employee is investigated. They're put on leave while that investigation is going on. Depending on what the investigation reveals, a recommendation then goes through all of their supervisors again to me on what should happen to that police officer, whether they should get a temporary suspension, whether they should be terminated, or whether they should just get more coaching and training because it wasn't intentional. And so that recommendation comes to me. I finalize that, like Pastor Webb said. I can only make a recommendation on whether an officer gets terminated for a police brutality case or not. It's up to the Civil Service Board or to a third-party arbitrator. All of that is from an administrative standpoint. If during that investigation, we feel like there was some criminal conduct that took place, much like you saw in Minneapolis, there's a criminal investigation that also occurs at the same time. And if there's enough evidence to show that that officer committed a criminal act, then that case gets referred to the grand jury, just like any other criminal case does, to see if the district attorney will prosecute it or not. That answer the question?
And that's why a lot of times, sometimes people want something to happen immediately to an officer. They immediately do this. I mean, there's a process that you have to go through. It's called due process. You have to go through it, because if you don't, then a smart attorney can get them off, basically. So that's why, I know people, they want something to be done, immediately. Why don't they do this? Why are they still out on the street? Why? Because this whole process that has to be, not, the public opinion can stop it from happening. It has to be done in order for this, process to work properly. So thank you, Lee. Blair.
Yeah, I just had a quick question for Desmond and Carly and Lee and Cisco and Ashley, and I'm sorry, what was your name again?
Leia.
Leia. Are any of y'all seriously interested in law enforcement as a career, or do you have any family members that are in law enforcement?
I used to want to be in a SWAT team, but I don't know anymore. Like I'm not exactly sure what I want to do after, like when I go to college.
Okay.
Don't you have a family member that's in law enforcement?
Yes.
Who?
My Uncle Dennis.
I'm not in law enforcement. Aren't your dad a sheriff?
Our dad is working to be a police officer.
Yeah.
I went to high school with your Uncle Dennis over there in Nimitz, so I was a Viking too. And I have no one in my family that was in law enforcement. I did have a cousin that wound up being a deputy chief with Dallas Police Department, and I didn't know that I wanted to do it either until I went on a ride along with him. So I really encourage you to give that a try, and just, if nothing else, it'll give you a far greater understanding of what officers actually experience day to day than what you see on the news, because the news is always negative about police officers. You don't hear about all the thousands of good things they do every single day, day in and day out. They're some of the finest people that we have in this country. So
Yeah.
I'd encourage you to do that.
Yeah. Cisco said he had a question.
I'm a very observant person, and I saw that he had 3 stars on the collar right here, and he had 4. So I was just wondering, what's the difference?
Good question, Cisco. Cisco said the police chief has 3 stars and the constable over here has 4 stars. So explain the stars, guys.
Well, Chief, I guess, we could actually have 3 if I chose to have 3. I'm an elected official, so I actually had to go out and run for my position. I was an officer with the Sheriff Department for 30 years. I retired, and after I retired, I was asked to come and run for this position. And my position, I'm called a constable, an elected constable. And so my areas, I'm gonna tell you this, my areas are Duncanville, DeSoto, Cedar Hill, Glen Heights, Irving, and Grand Prairie. So I'm the elected constable over those areas. And the guys that I have working for me, we are civil. What civil is, my guys, they serve like civil paperwork, which would be like if someone's getting sued, they will go out and serve paperwork to let somebody know they're getting sued, or someone's going to get evicted, they would go serve those paperwork to let that person know they get evicted. So those are the kind of things my guys do. Didn't really make a difference how many stars you got on there. I just chose 4 stars because that's what I just wanted on them. So it doesn't really make a difference. I don't outrank anybody here. I'm an elected official. He's the chief of Irving here. So we're in two different departments though. That's what that is.
So it's a great question, very observant, Cisco. So the reason I wear 3 is it designates how many levels of chiefs are below me. So you have the chief of police, and in Irving, you have an assistant chief of police, and you have a deputy chief of police. And so that's why I wear 3. It signifies how many levels of chiefs there are. The Dallas chief, she wears 4 stars as well, because she has an extra layer of chiefs below her. She has her as the chief of police. She has an executive assistant chief of police. She then has assistant chiefs of police and deputy chiefs of police. And so it's just a way to designate layers of command levels within police departments.
Okay. Does anybody else have any other questions before? I've got a question that from the audience, but go ahead, Carly.
I know that different police departments around the country have changed the way they do things and like have banned certain things like a chokehold. Have the Irving Police Department changed anything or done anything differently?
Good question.
It's a great question. We're in the process of doing that. Back in 2016, the President Task Force on 21st Century Policing, President Obama formed a task force after the Michael Brown incident in Ferguson. They looked at policing. They recommended some changes to police departments and policies. We made some changes back then in our use of force policy and our chase policy and some of the other things that we've done. What you've heard since the George Floyd incident are recommendations on other changes. And we're in the process of making those changes. We've always had a duty to intervene built into our policies. It wasn't specifically spelled out, but we're adding that language to our policies right now. Those should go out on Friday. Along with the duty to intervene, there's going to be a policy that requires that we give aid anytime that someone is hurt, even if we're the ones who hurt them. I can tell you in my 30 years of being a police officer, that's always been our natural response to that, but it's never been spelled out in policy, so we're going to add that to our policies. And we don't have a chokehold. By definition, a chokehold is when you put your arm or a leg across the front of someone's throat that damages those structures in the front of the throat. But a lot of people consider a neck restraint a chokehold. And it's hard for police departments in today's time to justify the difference. We have taught the neck restraint. We've had the neck restraint for longer than I've been a police officer with the city of Irving. We've never had any negative effects from applying that technique. We've never had anyone seriously injured or killed that we've applied that technique to. But I don't think our public is okay with us doing that any longer. And so we're making a change and we're doing away with that neck restraint. And I'm in the process of getting that policy changed. In fact, my PIO, my public information officer, is here tonight. He and I have been working on a script and a video for me to put out to all of our police officers explaining why we're making the changes. Cat's kind of out of the bag tonight, I guess, on what's happening. You're getting it before a lot of the police officers have gotten it, although I've had the conversation probably for the last 3 weeks on us moving that direction, and that policy should come out as well on Friday. So we are making some changes. I think that our public expects more of us or expects differently of us than they used to, and we need to be amenable to that. We need to be willing to change to meet our public's expectations.
Thank you, Chief. I'm going to step in here and ask a few questions, and anybody feel free to chime in on that's come in from the Facebook. This question is to the police. What do the police feel can be done to help with the issues we are seeing today? And they didn't clarify what issues, but I'm pretty sure we kind of got an idea. So from your perspective as police officers, how could the public help you? just, and any law enforcement, because, Takia, when you're out there, they don't see sheriff, they see a police officer because you got a gun. So, how you think, or what do you feel can be done to help, with the issues we have today?
I think one thing that the public can do is be a bit understanding. When we are called to a situation, we're called there because there's a problem. And some of the times, especially in like mental illness, the person that we're called out on doesn't want us there or isn't comfortable with us and didn't ask for us to be there. And so a bit of compliance and just a bit of like a little bit of patience, because we're coming into an unknown environment, and we're dealing with a situation with a person a lot of times who's already aggravated or agitated or uncomfortable. So I think that bit of just, okay, what do you need and what can I do? If we're stopping you, as they said, hands on the wheel. I like at nighttime when they roll the windows down, because if I'm flashing my flashlight to make sure nobody's in the back seat, or if I can see their hands, sometimes that light will bounce back on my eyes. So just that level of respect. And I understand as Black people, we get categorized as Black people are ghetto, or they're dangerous, or you can't trust them. And as officers, we get categorized. If you're Black, that maybe you're a traitor. I had a person tell my baby, you don't need to trust her, and you need to come home with me. Another Black woman said that. So we deal with a lot, and I think that just that little level of understanding, I understand respect to get respect, but it has to start somewhere. So that's my thing.
Thank you. Thank you. Anybody else want to chime in? How can the public help?
Well, I could say a lot on this topic, but one thing I would like to mention is that, just from watching television, being around certain individuals in the community, you hear this talk about don't be a snitch. Don't snitch. Don't. That's street code. Don't snitch. And as of lately, you've had a few celebrities that came out against Black Lives Matter because of the 8-year-old girl that was shot and killed by the Wendy's, where Rayshard Brooks was shot as her mother was driving into that parking lot. And I think as of today, they still don't know which two individuals shot and killed this little girl. I would like to say situations like that, where you feel where police officers are not doing anything to stop crime in our communities, to step up and help us out in those situations. Because another thing that I went on to Black Lives Matter website, and I wanted to get a better understanding of what they were trying to accomplish. And looking through the website, I see where there were 3 co-founders. There's not really a main leader in Black Lives Matter because you have so many different chapters throughout the country. And when you look at what the end goal is for Black Lives Matter, which I know if you watch television, the main objective is police brutality. But also is defunding the police. Also is for sponsors not to sponsor prisons, because they feel that a lot of the money that's being put into prisons should be allocated to different areas within the community. So there's so many different objectives that they would like to accomplish. And the main thing is that the police doesn't help us because they always arrive after the fact. They arrive after the fact. They're not there to protect us. Police don't protect us. That is the big drive that I saw on that website. And, not only with that 8-year-old, but there was also incidents in Chicago where some young kids were shot and killed, and no one stepped up and said anything as far as who was the shooter in those incidents. But things like that, I would like to see the community more involved in helping us solve those particular crimes.
Okay, yeah, that's the thing that always intrigued me about a lot of the crime is that, people in the neighborhood actually know who the person who committed the crime is, but for some reason they either fear or whatever they want. And I know it's tough, but that's important. I'll just add one to this, how we can help. Social media, it's a good thing and it's a bad thing. And one of the things that frustrates me a lot is people post videos on social media, but they don't give context to the video. They just post the video, and I'll just give you a perfect example. Real quickly, I had one sent to me the other day, and there was a news report. In the news report, the very first video that the news reporter showed was 2 police officers on the ground with a guy on the ground holding him down. And that was the very first video they showed. And then, and then they pretty much just demonized the police officers for just, arresting this guy for dancing in the street. Well, I thought it was interesting at the very end of it, they actually showed the body cam of the police officer. And what they failed to show at the beginning was the police officer gets out, walks up to him, having a cordial conversation with him, asking him questions. The guy immediately copped an attitude and told him, "Thank you, sir. Have a good day," to the police officer. And the guy went to walk off, and the police officer said, "No, sir, remember, detained, sir." And at that point, the guy reaches back here like this, and he pulls out his keys because he said, I'm about to leave. Now, they didn't show all that at the beginning. They started out by showing 2 officers holding the guy down. Well, it went, bad. And finally, the guy started tossing, and they took him down. So my point I'm making here is this, is that if you're going to post something, get the context of it. Don't, because sometimes people will post things because all they want to do is just stir people up. And everybody's not going to investigate fully the truth. So that's one thing. Desmond.
I like how everything everybody just said about the misunderstandings that happen. And I believe that's really the main source of kind of how different incidents happen, kind of because the media sometimes contorts, the videos and different things that happen, but also the resources that, like this, for example, aren't publicized as much, as maybe the riots or the protests. Sometimes these resources are not publicized as much. So I think that's one thing that we can definitely do is try to publicize these events more, because a lot of these things that I'm learning tonight I never knew, about the process and how long it takes. So I'm just thankful for things of this, these type of events.
Yeah, and I would also say this, this is the first, I think, law enforcement and youth event, but we've had about, I don't know how many law enforcement and youth events. We've had 2 of them at this church, but they was poorly attended. And unfortunately, I remember the very first one we had, in connection with the Urban Police Department and NAACP. I think we had 3 youth here, and I was very frustrated. Well, so I said, we're going to try it again, and I think we had maybe 1 or 2 youth. So the most important thing is, yes, there is resources, but the police department don't really know you want the resources. You have to seek those resources out yourself. So when you find out about resources, share it with the community. There's a lot of things that especially the urban police departments do. And Chief, if you would share briefly about shop talk. I think that's something else that, when we talk about outreach, this is an outreach that our police chiefs have been doing here in the community. And then we'll get back to the questions.
So in 2016, right after the 5 police officers were murdered in Dallas, one of our gang officers, John Plunkett, a black officer who's been part of our organization for over 30 years now, came to me. I was an assistant chief at the time. He came to me and said, "Chief, what are we doing to make our relationships with our African-American community stronger?" And so I talked about the relationship that we had as an organization with the NAACP and the outreach events that we tried to participate in. And he said, "Well, that's not reaching everybody. It's not reaching the right people." And I said, "Well, John, what do you think we should do?" And he goes, "I think we need to get a program in our barbershops." He goes, the African-American barbershop is a place where people feel safe. They share a lot of their personal life. They ask a lot of questions. It's more of a social event than it is anything. And I think if we could get into those barbershops, we could begin to really develop relationships. And so we did in September of 2016. We hosted our first event at Mitchell's Barbershop there at Beltline and Country Club. And from that point on, it continued to grow and continued to spread. Now we're over 20 shops and salons. So we're not just in barber shops now, we're also in hair salons. We have the female stylist involved in our program as well. We have police officers who just stop by the shops and engage in conversations with the owners and with the customers. Once a quarter, I host an owner's luncheon where I bring all the owners who are able to attend in, and we share a sandwich and we talk about what's going on in the neighborhoods, and we talk about what we can do differently as a police organization. They've begun to own the program. They've started their own outreach programs, their own scholarship programs, and it's really a way that the community can be involved with the police and the police can be involved with the community and really break down some of those barriers that sometimes gets built. I would encourage everyone who's watching, who's here tonight, go to our website. We have a special page for our Shop Talk program. Go to the City of Irving's YouTube page. Over the last 3 weeks, we've put out 2 videos. ICTN has put out 2 videos highlighting the Shop Talk program. One came out today where we highlight one of the salon owners, and she tells her story about how she got involved in the program. She shares some very personal information. It's a very powerful story, and it highlights one of the other programs we have, which is our Rape Aggression Defense Program, or our RAD program, because she shares a story where she was attacked and how the RAD program would have helped her. So it's truly a remarkable program started by one individual, one of my police officers who said, you know what, we can do better, and so let's figure it out. And it's really grown. It's getting some attention nationwide. Officer Plunkett won a U.S. Attorney General's Award for community policing last year. He's been recognized by the NAACP for his work with the program. And I would encourage, if you're not from the Irving community, if you're somewhere else watching this, that you go to your police department and you encourage them to get involved in a similar type program, because it really does make a difference.
Thank you. Another question from the listening audience, and we got quite a few people who are really chiming in. They're having their own personal discussions amongst themselves also. But there's some good questions, and this question was, do 911 call takers have any training on mental illness?
They do, but it's, as you can imagine, trying to diagnose a mental illness over the telephone would be incredibly difficult. So they're trained to listen for certain cues, listen for certain words, to ask certain questions, but that's an incredibly difficult job. Just on a normal basis, and dealing with someone in a mental health crisis only adds to the complexity of what they have to do.
Okay, so some training, but it's pretty difficult over the phone to do. They're not diagnosing anything. Another question is, you had mentioned about like your policy, you know, can the public get access to like the policies, like the police policies? I know I got a copy of them. You know, are those available to the public?
Yes, they are.
Okay. Where would they find those?
So you can, right now, you can file an open records request and get a copy of our policies. We're working to get those onto the website so that anyone has access to them. We're going through changing them, getting them reformatted. We'll issue a new set of policies in January of this year to cover the next 2 years, and so they'll soon be available on the website. And
so you and I are going to be in trouble now because Sinead's going to be pretty upset when she starts getting all these open records requests for your policies. So, and I'm going to blame you, all right? Yeah, but if you want to, see the policies he's talking about, then yeah, you can. They've got them. They're available to the public. One other question. Not a question. And then we can go back, if any of you youth still have some more questions, we still got about 20 minutes, we can continue on. But, Chief, you know, throughout the country and here in the past, there've been this call for like police citizens review boards and these oversight boards, et cetera. I learned that we've got a police advisory board. Would you kind of share with the public what that is and how long it's been in existence?
So we've had a training advisory board for as long as we've had a training academy. That's one of the mandates that TCOLE requires, and TCOLE is the licensing agency for police departments and police officers in the state of Texas. And so they require, if you have your own training academy, that you have to have an advisory board. In 2017, when I took over as chief, I expanded that board from 3 community members to 6 or 7, I believe. I think we're missing one right now, so I think we have 6 community members right now. We went from meeting once a month to meeting once a quarter. Those community members that serve on that training advisory board represent our entire community. It's a very diverse board, and they sit every quarter and they listen to us, what we're doing from a training perspective, what policies we're talking about instituting or what policies we've instituted since we've last met. They bring feedback to us from their sphere of influence, from their groups that they engage with on recommendations for training, recommendations on policies, and really provide us that citizens' insight that we need that sometimes we lose sight of because we're caught up in the day-to-day of just being police officers and doing our job. So it's been very beneficial for us, and I think serves a great purpose in helping our department stay on the right track.
Okay. So, youth, do y'all have anybody got any more questions or comments that y'all like to make? I do have another question, but I want to kind of see if you guys still have any questions, anything that's on your mind, anything that you want a further elaboration from the officers about. Any questions that you want to ask the officers? If not, I'm going to move on to this next question that has been, yes, sir. Oh, I'm sorry, Ashley.
I just wanted to ask a question. How do you guys feel about the peaceful protests, like people getting hurt and you see them getting hurt and like crying? Does it ever make you feel discouraged or like people are like really getting like the wrong idea of like how police officers and stuff like that work?
Okay. Kid?
For me, when I see those peaceful protests and then I see those people getting tear gassed and all those different things, I think it's really sad. And I think it highlights a very real issue in our communities. And I think that's where the need for reform does come from. But I think that on both sides, some balance and some ownership does need to be recognized and taken. That I don't think anybody wants to own. So as far as peaceful protest, I feel like everyone has a right to protest, and I feel like your voices at that point does become heard, and I think that it's our job as officers to recognize when people are being peaceful and when people are just trying to voice a situation for their lives that their brothers, their sisters, their mothers, their aunts have dealt with. And I think that seeing that, it hurts me when I hear counterparts downgrading that or saying these people need to stay at home and they can watch this from the couch. If everybody's watching from the couch, there's nothing to watch from the couch. That's my thought. But yeah, it can be very sad, and it's one of the reasons why I became an officer, to show that everybody's not the same. And just like black people, all black people aren't violent, right? And all officers aren't racist. And I think that from that standpoint, we need to realize that we can't put everybody the same, but definitely realize what role we do play in the perceptions that are out there, because we all play a role as officers and as citizens, and we need to own that and take accountability for our actions.
Great, good answer. Good. Anybody else? Desmond.
This question is kind of back to you, Takia. I know sometimes, especially in the Black community, I don't want to make a complete generalization, but I know with my experiences, sometimes distrust of law enforcement and the government can be cultural. What would you recommend for us to kind of undo that cultural distrust of police and the government?
Become a police officer.
Yeah, yes, in the Black community, definitely, becoming a police officer is a really good eye opener. And going to those events, as Pastor Webb highlighted, there are events held for the community, and I've heard them, and I've seen the flyers, and I've heard the advertisements on radios for community events where they're calling for the community to come out, and they don't. They don't come out, but then a guy gets on Facebook Live and says, hey, this gas station owner did this, and they're out in droves with water bottles and food, and they're out there for hours. That bothers me because, yes, that action does need to be taken and something needs to be done, but where does the conversation start? And a lot of times at those community events, at those things that officers are hosting, it definitely starts. So say the question again, Desmond.
How do we undo the cultural distrust of law enforcement?
Okay. And so, then taking a look and really taking an understanding of stepping out on faith, stepping out on that. You, like I said before, it has to start somewhere. And just taking back and saying, well, maybe this officer isn't like that officer on TV. Owning our actions and seeing what was wrong and what did we do anything wrong, and just knowing that people aren't the same. Every officer isn't the same. There definitely needs to be changes made in departments, but I think as Black citizens, we do have to own our part in that. And I'm not saying that that's all our fault, for sure. This issue has been around long before any of us was born. I just think it starts with taking that step to be informed by someone from the department and not by a web page put up by some person who is very, very biased and doesn't know the full truth or only posting part of the facts. So getting your information from real people, from the government websites, or from your local police department, who definitely would reach back to you if you reached out to them.
All right. Anybody else? Okay. Let's see. I had a question here. Let me go back to it. This question, Chief, is to you. If people would comply with officers' commands, will most of these incidents we see go away? It's kind of a...
I think the short answer to that is yes. We've spoken to that a little bit tonight about just cooperating and getting through that, whether it's a traffic stop or getting through that arrest. I think 90+% of these incidents would never happen. But I think it goes deeper than that. I think you have to look at why people aren't willing to comply, and I think that gets very complex. But we have to own some of that as police officers. They might not be willing to comply because they don't trust us. They might not be willing to comply because we've asserted some overbearing authority on them, and it's caused them to react differently than they would otherwise. And to be honest, they might not want to comply because they don't want to go to jail. And that's a very real fact, that they recognize they've been caught doing something. They know that there's going to be a harsh punishment for it, and they're willing to do whatever it takes to avoid going to jail. And so I think it's a very complex issue that we just can't say yes or no and just walk away feeling good about the answer. I think you have to look at each individual case and figure out how that could have been done differently, how we could, as police officers, we should always be evaluating how we respond to whatever the circumstance is, as community members, when you have that trust in law enforcement, when you have that trust in the police, and you feel like that you're going to get a fair shake, then maybe that allows you to be more compliant in a particular circumstance, and it doesn't lead to that violence that we all see on video.
Okay. I got a question that a lot of people have asked this question or have made these statements, and it's about police shooting or deadly force. But I've had people say, why don't police officers just shoot and wound people? You know, why they gotta shoot them and kill them? You know, and so either one of you police officers want to respond to that as to, you know, wounding. You know, they've been watching, you know, police officers on TV and everything. Can you kind of speak to that in all seriousness? Can you kind of speak to that?
Yes, sir. And then I have a question for the youth after this.
Okay.
But, so the people often formulate their opinions by whatever media they're exposing themselves to, and then they armchair quarterback YouTube videos or cell phone videos or whatever. But also, they base it on John Wick and movies like that. It's not that easy. And like the chief was talking about, the use of force policy, like that's what we go off of. And if it's time to start pulling the trigger, it's because the threat has to be stopped as soon as possible. And to ask a police officer to put around in someone's leg who's shooting at them is grossly unreasonable and borderline, well, never mind, I won't say that, but it's, good luck. Good luck, all right? If you believe it's not true, then I encourage you to go grab a couple airsoft pistols, and then your buddy gets to shoot you wherever he wants, but you have to put it in his leg. My kids have airsoft, and it hurts. So see how accurate you are with an airsoft gun. And those guns are usually pretty accurate. And see how hard it is under a minor amount of stress. Now imagine your life is actually at risk at the hands of someone else. And to ask someone to surgically place a round that you hope stops them from shooting at you, it's impossible.
Okay. Anybody else want to add to that? Any other law enforcement official want to add to that? Okay. All right. So basically, in other words, it's not as easy to just shoot and wound somebody. I remember first time I ever shot a pistol. I don't even know where the bullet went because it didn't even hit the target. And so if anybody used to shooting, but at the end of the day, what you're saying is basically you stop the threat. It's what you're trained to do. You're trained to stop the threat. Desmond, and we have about 10 minutes.
Okay. I was just curious, during what circumstances do you use, like, for example, in what circumstance would you use a taser? Which circumstance would you use a gun? Like, what constitutes what type of, force, I should say? I know it's different, but just a general, idea.
I think we all have this. I think we all have the same ladder of force that we use, and unless it's changed, but the ladder of force normally starts out with a verbal command. Go from a verbal command to having to go hands-on, putting your hands on that person, and then you go to where you would use your mace, your asbaton, your taser. Go up unless I skip one, but you normally go from one to the next. So when you have to use your mace or your asbaton or your taser, it's because you've gone up the ladder of force, and that's normally what you're supposed to do. Now you see a lot of situations where you see officers going from a verbal command straight to their guns. I believe that's because they're not trained properly. I believe that's an issue that we have right now, where you see officers automatically going right from giving a verbal command and straight to their guns because they're intimidated and they're not trained correctly. But you're supposed to use a ladder of force, going from verbal, going hands-on, going to the mace, the asbatons, or whichever one your department says. So it depends on that threat. If you've been able to talk that person down, you asked about de-escalation earlier. If you've been able to talk that person down by using your de-escalation skills, and you talk that person down with your voice command, well, you're good. But then you may have to go hands-on, actually put your hands on that person, grab that person, and put the handcuffs on that person. If that doesn't work, you may have to use your mace, or your asperton, or your taser. But it just depends on the situation. But it depends on you being able to go up your ladder of force. Deadly force is always last. You shouldn't be able to go from talking to someone to deadly force unless deadly force is presented towards you. All right?
Okay. So I'll tell you what, we're going to kind of start wrapping it up by, I'm going to ask this question to the officers first, and then I'll ask my next question to the youth. What would you tell these youth, and this officer, what would you tell these youth or any other youth watching this session here that, like, from the heart? You know, just from your heart. What would you, if you could had a group of youth right there in front of you, and what would you tell them? You got 1 minute. What would you tell them? Most priority of your mind right now to speak to youth. What would you tell them? And I guess, Chief, we'll start with you, since you got the 3 stars.
I think priority on my mind right now would be to understand that police officers are human beings who are prone to mistakes, who are prone to reacting out of emotion, who are prone to anger, who are prone to have egos, just like everyone else in society. We don't hire robots. And to understand that when you encounter that police officer, you have no idea what that police officer has been through that day. And your words, your actions, your lack of cooperation may be that thing that causes that police officer to act in a way that he or she wouldn't normally act in. That no police officer wakes up and comes to work hoping that they get to shoot somebody that day, hoping that they get into a fight with somebody that day. Every police officer wakes up and comes to work just wanting to be able to go home back to their family. And understanding those stressors, understanding that we're human beings, I think goes a long way in how that interaction ultimately turns out.
Thank you. And we'll just go down the line.
I would like to say to form your own opinion. Get out, meet officers. You have officers in your schools. Go up, talk to them, and just form your own opinion of their integrity and their character. You know, get to know them. Don't just take information for what you see on social media or what your friends are telling you how police officers are. You take it upon yourself to meet an officer and see how they are and form your own opinion. And you would be surprised if you do that.
Thank you. Blair.
I would just reiterate a little bit of what the chief said, that the last thing an officer wants to do is to hurt somebody, because that brings a world of hurt to them too, personally and professionally. So don't prejudge them when they come into contact with you. They're just doing their job. They're paid to do it, and they may be doing things you don't understand at the moment they're doing them. But if you ask them and treat them with respect, you're definitely going to get respect back from them, and I'm sure they'd be happy to explain those things that they did at that time that you didn't understand. So,
Thank you. Kit.
I would say mainly what I've been saying before, and what Officer Baisley said, because that was my exact thoughts. Form your own opinions. A lot of our parents have been through stuff that we can never imagine, and they definitely speak those opinions upon us, and those become our views. But the world is changing every day, hopefully, with prayer. But get to know the officers around you, and figure out for yourself, is this officer a good officer? Does he have my best interest at heart? Because chances are that he really does. And that's not to say that's all officers, because we know people are people, and everyone is an individual. So we do hope that officers who wear this uniform, who don't have people's best interests at heart, are awakening to what's going on. I do personally, and hope that they may change or find a career better suited for them, so that safety of our citizens and our people are first. So yeah, get to know the people around you, because some of us really do have a heart for helping and serving people.
Thank you. Constable?
I'd like for him to know that the main reason the majority of us took this job is to protect and serve. And I would tell them that I believe that that's what we want to do. We want to protect and serve. We're not perfect. We're going to mess up. We're going to do some things wrong. But I believe that the majority of us, the majority of our hearts are in the right place, and we're trying to do things to help our elderly and our youth and protect everybody out there. So I would tell them not to judge us too harshly, hold us accountable for the things that we do wrong, things that we know we're doing wrong, hold us accountable. But don't judge us because of the color of our skin, because of some bad encounter you had with another person, with another officer. Don't judge all of us and say, well, all of you guys are bad because this one incident I had with this officer, so all officers are bad, because that's not correct. So I would just like for them to understand that we're people, we're going to mess up, we're going to do things right, but to just give us an opportunity to go out there and do our jobs the best we can.
Thank you. Travis?
Y'all stole all the good information, so. I guess I can just tag on to a lot of what everyone else said about we are human beings, we do make mistakes. Next week I have a safety review board for running into a pole with a police car to see if I need some punishment. So do trust us that we do keep an eye out for bad apples in our peers. These things are some of the greatest additions, probably the greatest addition to police work in the last 20 years. Right? It holds us accountable. It keeps the truth out there. Right. So have faith. I just let's all just try to live by the two greatest commandments that Jesus told the disciples.
Come on.
Love God and love your fellow man.
Come on.
And then we should all be doing it right at the end of the day.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you so much. So we're going to begin with Lee here. Lee, I want each one of you youth to share with us and share with the listening audience what one thing that you learned. I know you probably learned quite a few of them, but what is the one thing that's really going to stay with you when you walk through that door tonight from this session? We'll start with Lee and we'll go and come around.
That like for the future, like when I get stopped, just treat them all with respect, like, because before we had this talk, I thought what everybody else think, like, about police, like, that they're, like, targeting us, but then after sitting down, having a serious talk with y'all, it's like, some people put themselves in situations to, like, for the things to happen to them, and, like, I learned just to be respectful to, like, you guys.
Thank you. Carly.
I've learned that don't put all officers in one category. They're all different people. And I learned that, there are good officers and that you don't have to get tents around them when you see them, because I've seen kids get tents and they see an officer walking by. So I just learned that to not judge others. Yeah.
Thank you. Desmond.
One thing I think that definitely will stick with me is the power of educating yourself and not, letting your implicit biases take over your thinking process. I think definitely when I leave here, everything that was said tonight will stick with me, and I'll be able to ponder on it and find resources to educate myself to, get rid of those biases that I do have and educate other people on the biases that they do have.
Come on.
Thank you. Ashley?
First of all, I wanted to say thank you for coming, because it's honestly a blessing to get this type of knowledge that you didn't know before. And what's going to stick with me is that there's always two sides to the story. Like the media, they promote like all policemen are bad and stuff like that. When really, like you say, you just want to go home. You just want to protect the community. So that would stick with me. Like not all police officers have bad intentions.
Thank you. Leah?
Something that stuck with me was that police's feelings, like what Takia said about how just because he's black, another black person was, being rude to you, even though we're in the same community. It's just different because it seems like police don't have feelings from what we see, but it's totally opposite.
Thank you. And Cisco?
I learned that next time you get pulled over, you should cooperate and be respectful, like Lee said, and that's all.
Thank you. And I want to say thank you to all of you, the police officers, law enforcement officers, to our youth, and to Blair and everyone, Constable and all who have been a part of this conversation. I plan to do these twice a month. We'll have a different subject each time, different groups of people coming together, because at the end of the day, to me, it's going to take people sitting down and getting to know each other. I hear a lot of things on I read a lot of things on Facebook, and I'm not one of these people. I don't like generalities. I'm a specific person. So I hear people say, well, we just all need to come together. But that's it. Okay, well, but that's true. But my question to those that are watching this is, are you going to be the one to make it happen? You're going to be the one to make that coming together happen, so that you can have some meaningful conversations, with people. And always, don't just use and run around with the same people that think like you all the time, and then respect people that disagree with you. Oh, you don't know how many people I've made mad because I don't, toe the line, but that's the chance I'm willing to take, because if sessions like these are getting people together and just have some conversation, getting to know each other, it's going to help, then I'm willing to do it. And so I think we all can make a difference. The one thing we've got to do is we got to return to hope. We're in a time right now where it's like everybody seems hopeless. Like there's no hope for none of this. And there is. The hope is going to begin with us. And so, again, thank you all for watching. Share this with other people who didn't get a chance to watch this tonight. Yes.
I'm sorry, Pastor Webb. I just wanted to just say one thing in regards to the community. If you guys could please stop telling your children that me or one of my counterparts is going to get them if they don't quit acting up in the store or being bad at school. You're painting a light on me that definitely isn't there. And most of the time I kind of look at the parent and say, is your parent being bad to you? Do your parent need to be for the police? But we paint views little bitty as very small kids, and be mindful of what you're teaching your kids and yourselves.
Thank you. The last Wednesday night of this month, I'm going to hold another one of these. The topic's going to be human relations. And we're going to talk about human relations. I'm going to invite a panel of people to come in and just sit down from all different ethnic groups and and everything, and just talk about human relations. Again, thank everybody for coming here tonight. As is my custom always, and Travis, you started going down the road with that. Our hope is going to lie in our faith and our trust in God. And so if y'all would indulge me, I just want to end our time with prayer. Father, we thank you for this opportunity to come together tonight. We thank you for the law enforcement officials. We thank you for these youth. Now, you know our dilemma. You know what we're trying to accomplish. And we pray that you would go into the hearts of all of those that are here, those who are watching, those who may have lost their trust for law enforcement. Help them to regain it. Father, however you choose to do it, I know you can. We pray for our law enforcement officials, dear God, police officers and sheriffs and ATF agents and constables and everybody that has to try to take care of keeping peace and safety. We know that within every human being, whether they wear a badge or whether they are in a medical field or whether they just work an everyday job, there are some things that are not right. We ask that you be the one that calls them to do what's right. Thank you once again for this privilege that we've had tonight. And we ask this prayer in Jesus' name. Amen. All right, I was supposed to give y'all